Evening, welcome to the bench. What I'm looking at doing today is giving you a bit of an insight into stripping down a Rover 24 spline diff. Reason why I'm stripping this down is I've got a Ashcroft air locker to replace the actual diff carrier, which will then be going into my 110. Purpose of this video is just give you a bit of an insight into stripping, overhauling a differential, setting up pinion height if required, if you're doing anything like regearing, or you just fancy checking the actual pinion height itself, setting the backlash on the actual crown wheel itself, and preloading the pinion. Relatively basic stuff if you've got the tools to do it. The entire step-by-step process is in most workshop manuals and even the Land Rover Rave manual. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to match mark the bearing caps, top and bottom, side to side, so that they can just be put to one side, and then what will happen is they will always go back in the same place. They won't get mismatched side to side, top to bottom, etc. We'll take the actual diff carrier away. That's going to be pretty much surplus to requirements. I'm not going to be too interested in anything with that apart from removing the crown wheel. What I am going to do with this, because my truck's running a bit of extra power, just for peace of mind before I strip it down, there is actually nothing wrong with this differential, but what I want to do is actually check the pinion height before strip down. That way then, prior to rebuilding, if it's incorrect or if it's out of spec, I can rectify that and order shims appropriately for the rebuild. If it's spot on, then it means I can just go straight into banging it all back together with the original shims rather than messing around. So let's get to it. Now, what I've done is single pop mark one side, double pop mark on the other side. And this means that as long as I put it back with the same marks, there will never be any issues, or shouldn't be any issues. Now what you've got three different kinds of Land Rover diff. You have got what we call the pre-rationalised, which in effect are pretty much just, well, what I expected to be mostly in series vehicles. Everything's Imperial on them. Turns out they're not just in series vehicles, they are actually in early Range Rover as well. Because the original carcass which I got for the original donor carcass I got was from a Range Rover Classic, which it was a 10 spline. Initially made the assumption that that was going to be suitable for the job. Turns out that what we've got with the rationalised, they use 3-inch diameter journal bearings. I'm sorry, on the pre-rationalised. On the rationalised, which is basically metric conversion, which I believe happened 83 or something like that. They changed that bearing outer diameter to 75mm. So the Ashcroft air locker comes from Ashcroft with bearings already fitted to the carrier unit. So obviously it's kind of important to make sure that that is the correct size for the bearings. You've got something like 1.6mm difference between a 3-inch and 75mm, so you're going to notice any you're going to notice it quite quickly that something's not correct. In regards to the actual bearing preload and backlight adjusters, they're both the same, so they don't really, it doesn't matter if they get mixed matched. There we have it, one diff centre already out. Now let's have a quick look to see what sort of life this had. This unit came out of a R-Reg Discovery which approximately had 180,000 miles on it, which is about normal, I suppose. Looking at this outer race, there's an unusual wear mark on it. It looks like possibly from a bit of distortion. But there's no evidence of Brunelling. The actual bearings are in pretty good condition, to be honest with you. I wouldn't have had any issues of just putting this straight back in if I wasn't putting an air locker in. So we'll put that to one side for the time being. I need to take the crown wheel off that carrier. Right, there we've got the pinion exposed. Now what I'm going to do is check the height of the actual pinion head. The way you do that is there's a set distance which you set a dial indicator to. For rationalised differentials, that spacer height is 39.5mm. So you set a dial indicator and that block on a flat, machined flat surface, and you zero the dial indicator to that 39.5, and then you use that to measure the height difference. Now normally what you've got, or not normally, on some occasions, certainly on the earlier ones, because apparently there were some manufacturing discrepancies in the earlier days with Land Rover, but what you sometimes will have is scribed on the head of the pinion. You'll have like a serial number, and then it will be below that it'll either be a plus or a minus, and it would be, for example, 3 or 2 whatever, and that's in thousandths of an inch. So if it was +3, you would actually set the pinion +3 thou on top of the gauge, so it would actually be lower. And then if it was minus, it would be, say, -3 thou, so it would be higher than your 0 point. What they say as well is on the later ones, there's no marking on them, they're actually set at 0, 0. So whatever your gauge is, that height should be. Now the actual proper way of doing it is you check the 2 journals, add them together, divide it by 2, and that's you're middling the error, if there is any error. So I'm only purely doing this out of wanting to check. This is going to be going into a vehicle which is running relatively high power for what it is, and I just want to make sure that it's pretty bang on. And then whilst it's apart, because I'm waiting for bearings and seals and all that sort of good stuff, I can get shims sorted if necessary. At the same time, if it's bang on, I know that I don't have to mess around with anything when rebuilding it. It would just be a case of throw it all back together, because you're not messing around with that. Don't end up needing to blue the crown wheel, because I'm not altering that at all. So, right, I've actually come to the conclusion that with this, there's no negative there. It was difficult to make it out because there's no decimal point or anything there. I've come to the conclusion after a bit of messing around off camera that that's actually positive 15.5 thou. So yeah, I'll just give you a quick example with the clock as to what I was doing with the setting standard. Here we go. So yes, it's a bit fiddly. You rock it side to side. Yeah, there we go. Right, I got about 16 thou there, either side of a rock. Gives you an example of how to check that. The setup which I've got here isn't as ideal as I was expecting it to be. I'll check the other side now and see, but I'm guessing that it's going to be pretty much there or thereabouts. I was a little bit confused to start with in regards to the actual numbers on the head of the pinion, because I didn't see any plus or minus there. But when I did the first fit of the gauge, the dial indicator on the pinion, there's something straight away. Wasn't able to notice that there's something that wasn't quite correct. So we'll check the other side now. I think I've got it there or thereabouts. Well, if that's correct, that's bloody way out. There we go, right. There we go. That's bang on 16 thou there again as well. So half a thou discrepancy from what is scribed on the pinion. yeah, I'm not going to worry about messing around too much with the shims, seeing as though they come in foul increments anyway, so it doesn't really make much odds in regards to that. So we'll proceed with stripping the rest of it down, ready to clean the casing up. One pinion flange. Now what these tend to do as well, this one's in pretty good condition, even though I've ordered a new one anyway. For the cost, I think a new flange is about £20 including that. But what they normally tend to do as well, you get a leaky seal. What generally happens is people just change the seal. What actually happens is a groove gets cut actually onto the pinion face here, so you'll put a new seal in and it won't last that long and you're wondering what's happened. And it's, yeah, that looks like part of the seal there as well. Yeah, you'll put a new seal in and then it's like, well, I put a new seal in not so long ago, why is it leaking again already? And that is because there's a groove in the flange. There we go. Right, I'll give this a tap out now. So, there's a pinion in pretty good nick. Again, same with the bearings. Now, if that height was incorrect, the pinion head height was way out. The actual shims to adjust it are in behind this race here. So whole, if you're starting from scratch, if you're re-gearing, what they say is, and there's actual proper tooling from Land Rover to remove these bearing races, remove and reinstall these bearing races without damaging them, without having to use a punch, to change these shims here. Now, you've got two sets of shims. You've got the ones behind this bearing race here, which set pinion height on the crown wheel, and then you've got another set which are including this spacer here, actually on the inside there, and that sets a preload for the bearings, brand new bearings. And the way you measure the preload, proper way to do it, again, if you're going through a re-gear, is you'd concentrate on setting the pinion height first, and then you'd have a look at, once you're happy with the pinion height, setting the preload, and you do that without the seal in, and it works off of how much force it takes to actually turn the pinion with new bearings seated in there. It's a very small amount. I believe it's something like, for brand new bearings, the resistance to move is somewhere in the region of around 9 Newton meters, give or take, once you overcome the inertia to actually move it. Apparently if you're using the old bearings, you set the preload and it's somewhere around 3 Newton meters, I believe. I wouldn't quote me on that. That's you need to have a look at the likes of a Rave manual or whatever for exact figures, but it's, you're in it for the price of the bearings. Why would you use old bearings? Let's get that seal out. There's the old seal, Vital seal. So, pinion bearing doesn't look too bad, it's a bit grubby. Some carburised oil on there, but that's no issue. Again, the races are good on this as well. And it would appear with this one, there's no shims on the back side of the input bearing here, which tells me what they've managed to do is actually preload the whole assembly with just using the pinion height shims. That's what would appear to be the case anyway. Right. Now, it's going to be quite tricky without the proper tools to do this, to get all of this apart without damaging shims. There we go. Right, that's the race out in a fashion. That's a preload shim. My mistake, I didn't see that come out. So that will go along with this up against that race there, and then you torque that down to desired torque. That sets your desired preload on the pinion bearings. Now there's only the one shim in here for pinion height. That was quite a thick one, which is good. No issues with that at all. And there's no other shims in there. Right, now just take the nose bearing out. That's the nose bearing out of race. As you can see with these, there's nothing wrong with these bearings at all, or certainly the outer races anyway. There's very little signs of any issues at all. Yeah, a nice dull finish actually where the roller's been running. There's no sign of any brunelling or anything nasty in there. Certainly no sign of there being water in this differential or anything, so it's pretty golden, to be honest. seat. Now that's how that would go together. You'd have shim, master shim, and then that on top. Right, that casing is now completely bare, ready for a bit of blast and a bit of painting. Make it look pretty before going on the new axle casing. Now, the last thing for me to do this evening is to remove the crown wheel off of the diff carrier. Now, sometimes with these, I've experienced different scenarios. Some of them are tight on the carrier, some of them are slack. It really does depend. And when I say tight, perfect example, I fitted a rear locker in my 110. That's a Salisbury axle. The crown wheel off of the old carrier was just a slight tap fit to get it off, but in order to get it actually onto the locker carrier, there was about a 1 to 2 foot interference on the ID of the crown wheel onto the diff carrier, so that required it to be warmed up to be fitted, which is also a bit of a tricky situation, because when you're dealing with things which are a shrink fit, which are also bolted up, you've got the age-old issue of it being ever so slightly out. You've got to work very quickly, you've got to have everything marked up when that happens, because that crown wheel will contract very quickly, but it will also heat up the material in the carrier, and then it will bind up, and if you're slightly out on the threads and you can't get the bolts in, you're back to knocking it off, warming this up, waiting for this to cool, and starting from scratch again. Right, let's get this crown wheel off. 9/16. There we are. Which I don't have a 9/16 socket, but a 14mm is sufficient with these. Yeah, 3/8 UNF, and these are also Loctited into the crown wheel. And so before reassembly, you have to clean all of these threads off with a Y brush or Y wheel, whatever you got at your disposal. Get all of the original Loctite off, and also clean the threads actually in the crown wheel as well. Now, this is looking like already that the crown wheel is tight on the carrier. So what I'll do is I'll leave 2 opposite bolts on. I'll go around the perimeter of the crown wheel with a soft face mallet, just giving it a tap around. The reason why I leave these bolts in is so that it doesn't drop straight away. There's an element of control there with the whole scenario. Also, if you actually see here on the crown wheel it says 155, that's to match that opinion, which is all good. Crown wheels and pinions are paired, you never mix and match, or you definitely shouldn't mix and match. However, if you're ever stuck for whatever reason, then I suppose. There we go. One small Land Rover Diff carrier. One crown wheel. And that is all for this evening. There we go. Thank you.